Greetings to all C3RF members and friends across Canada and indeed around the world, and a special welcome to the folks at Veterans for Freedom on their dedicated streaming channels as they view this video summary of the C3RF update for 9 August 2024. The title of this update is Newspeak, and it begins by wondering if Orwell's 1984 has been made manifest in today's Canada. After all, the novel introduced the world to the concept of doublespeak and its underpinning enablers in the form of doublethink and newspeak. For its part, doublethink allowed for opposing thoughts to operate in a mutually supportive fashion as demonstrated by the phrases war is peace and freedom is slavery. In the meantime, newspeak provides for the controlling of thought through language by deliberately obscuring, distorting, disguising, or reversing the actual meaning of words. Examples abound in today's Canada as we see words assign new meanings in an underhanded exercise that aims to confuse and discombobulate any who would dare challenge a flavor of the day narrative. Examples include the word anti-racism, which now means anti-white, the word consensus, which now means unanimity of thought, and the word education, which now means indoctrination. It is evident that newspeak is alive and well throughout the public square in Canada, including the domain of public health. As early as 2009, for example, we saw the term pandemic redefined by the World Health Organization on our behalf. The original understanding of the term as a contagion that, quote, occurs when a new influenza virus appears which the human population has no immunity, resulting in several simultaneous epidemics worldwide with enormous numbers of deaths and illness, unquote. This was reordered to omit the portion that stated with enormous numbers of deaths and illness. The change would prove to be significant with the rise of the Wuhan virus, as an unsuspecting public, believing that the related declaration of a pandemic would come with massive loss of life, would be spooked into flattening the curve when such losses were not in the cards. Newspeak's subterfuge during the Wuhan virus pandemic would not be limited to one word. Oh no. The term vaccine would also undergo a redo, as it went from a medical product designed to, quote, produce immunity to a specific disease, unquote, that was up until 2021, to one that would, quote, produce protection to a specific disease, unquote. The change was a subtle one, with protection replacing immunity, but the new formulation was an absolute necessity, as Wuhan virus gene therapies, advertised as vaccines, were incapable of providing the immunity that political and public health authorities had promised. As was the case with the term pandemic, the initial widely understood meaning of vaccine would be used to prompt an initial public response. That response, in the case of the term pandemic, would be to stampede the public towards any perceived safe haven. In turn, that safe haven would be admirably served by safe and effective vaccines that were seen to provide blanket immunity when they did not. If newspeak is the art of controlling thought through language, then one could not find a better example than the Canadian use of the word fundamental. In times not so far in the past, this word used to connotate an entity that formed a base from which everything else developed. In the Canadian constitutional sense, fundamental was aptly applied to a numbered set of rights in Section 2 of the Charter that were seen as worthy of being secured as a priority. This was the case as all other rights and freedoms enjoyed by Canadians were dependent on their own survival on the right to speak and worship freely, to hold fast on thoughts and beliefs without coercion, and to associate and assemble peaceably without impediment. After all other rights, including the democratic right to vote and to travel freely, depended on the fundamental right to voice criticism of measures that would curtail them. It wouldn't take long before newspeak began to twist the thinking on just how important the term fundamental was when it came to other terms that vied for supremacy. One of these was the word balanced, as court decision after court decision used the concept of balancing rights off against each other in a zero-sum game. Accordingly, the Charter's Section 15 equality provisions were offered up buffet-style against their fundamental counterparts as deserving of equivalent or superior status. And so we saw the ability of Canadians choosing to practice their Christian religion in areas that involved abortion, euthanasia, and human sexuality, losing out to a perceived need to satiate the sensibilities of a rising number of victims groups. This was demonstrated clearly in a number of Supreme court case decisions, including that of the Trinity Western University case of 2018. The Trinity Western case involved a number of Canadian law societies refusing to accredit the university's law program. No one felt the institution was incapable of producing fine lawyers, but Trinity proposed to do so while subjecting students to a faith-based community standards as they did so. Accordingly, the Supreme Court ruled that fundamental rights to belief and conscience needed to be set aside, as the court concluded that this potential dignitary harm to future LGBT law students, was concrete, while the infringement on Trinity's religious liberty from refusing to accredit its qualified law program was minimal. It mattered not that Trinity was already cleared to train public school teachers, or that LGBT students knew in advance of the faith-based standards and could apply elsewhere without penalty. Fundamental rights needed to take a back seat to, quote, blatant secularist oppression, unquote. It's easy to see how fundamental rights within the Canadian context could be balanced away in such a fashion. As Supreme Court Justice Rosalie Abella would note, the Canadian Constitution came loaded with a get-out-of-jail-free card in the form of a Section 1 limitations clause. This clause stated that charter rights could be overridden if such could be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. And it was not long before the judicial class would borrow the concept of proportionality from the German Constitution. To do so, the barn door was swung wide open. Fundamental rights could now be infringed upon given a reasonability test administered by the members of an unelected judiciary. This in direct opposition to the intent of the Charter's framers, like that of the Honourable Brian Peckford, who insisted that such Section 1 infringements could only be countenanced, quote, in war, insurrections, and dire situations, unquote. This as denoted in Section 4 of the Charter. If equivalency between fundamental and balance didn't degrade the civil liberties of Canadians sufficiently, then the Newspeak's introduction of diversity could complete the task. Diversity is our strength became the new Canadian narrative that would brook no challenge. The more diverse the condition or narrative, the better to prove the point. Accordingly, unsubstantiated ideologies like gender fluidity would be thrown into the breach to create concern and frustration within communities that viewed human sexuality through a more traditional lens. Where the litigants in the Trinity Western case were told their efforts to impose faith-based community standards would harm the dignity of those who disagreed, those caught up in refuting diversity would be told their hateful efforts risk actual physical harm within the trans domain. And so it was with James Enos from the Christian Heritage Party as he asserted his right to speak out on the issue of gender fluidity. James is no novice when it comes to dealing with the diversity is our strength buzzsaw. His first encounter was in 2016 when his party took the city of Hamilton to court for removing bus shelter ads that questioned the right of trans females to enter the private and intimate spaces of girls and women. The case was won in 2018 with the Judicial Review panel agreeing that freedom of speech was a valid competing human right. Jim is now embroiled in a second case with the same city of Hamilton over bus shelter ads that proclaim women to be defined as adult females. The city has responded saying free speech can't compete with the need to secure the physical safety of trans persons who might be emotionally hurt by such alleged truths. It would appear that free speech has not just been removed from the field of competition, it has been consigned to being subjugated to the emotional needs of the squeakiest wheel. In closing, a reminder to join us at www.canadiancitizens.org, where you can see this update in its full glory, including all the links to all of its cited documents. Simply go to the News tab at the top of the page and select C3RF member updates from the drop-down menu. Until next time, this is Russ Cooper signing off, wishing you and yours much happiness and freedom from